Hello everybody, welcome to Euronews YouTube channel, welcome to Euronews headquarters here in Brussels. We're right in the heart of the action. We've got the European Commission just over there, the European Parliament just down the road, and we are here to talk about water, specifically the new strategy that we have on water coming from the European Commission soon. And we're looking forward to hearing more about that, debating about it, trying to understand more. We know that water systems in Europe are under a lot of pressure. We've got pollution, we've got climate change, we've got many, many demands on water from industry, from individuals like you and me, from agriculture, of course, as well. And we know that this system is under pressure and we need to take action to try and fix it. So, we're going to take questions from the audience as well, but let me introduce our panelists. Hildegard Benteler, who is a MEP from Germany from the European People's Party. Thanks for being with us. Over here we have Jan Berger, who's the Senior Director for Climate and Water Sustainability from Coca-Cola Europe. Veronica Manfredi, who is the Director for Zero Pollution, Water Resilience and the Green Urban Transition at the European Commission's Directorate General for the Environment. And Kodrutsa Savu, who's a policy lead for freshwater and climate adaptation at WWF's European Policy Office. Thanks for being with us. Hildegard, can you just break it down for us? We've got this new water resilience strategy that's coming from the European Commission. What is the problem that we're trying to fix?
Well, the problem is that Europe is under water stress, and even more our southern regions are really seeing more and more extreme weather events. And this causes a lot of, not only damages, it also is a issue of security, because we are used to the fact that we can access water at all time. But we have also seen, scarcities. We have seen that, restrictions on water use. And I think this is why this urgency has come up, and this is why the president of the Commission has acted and has put water at a high level of the Commission's work, has nominated a commissioner for water. And this is also the reason why, before the Commission, the Parliament has initiated an initiative report on it, which we just voted yesterday in committee.
Absolutely, and we'll talk about that and reaction to that, because you have your own initiative version of this, your own view of how things should go. Jan Berger, from Coca-Cola's point of view, is that the problem, or are there other things we should add into the list of problems?
So water is, of course, essential for everyone. So for all the inhabitants, for businesses, for nature, and also farmers. But water is particularly, I think, relevant for us as a beverage company. It's the main ingredient.
Yeah.
Guess what?
We would think you would be concerned by that.
Yeah. So, okay, that's clear, I think. But it's not only the main ingredient. We also need water for our factories to keep the hygiene and the food safety. We need water for our ingredients.
But do you feel pressure at the moment in terms of water supplies?
Yes, and indeed, as Hildegard already mentioned, we see predominantly the pressures now in the Mediterranean, where water scarcity is really building after 3 years of droughts. Now they have had recently enormous rains, but
yeah, it's the exact opposite actually last month.
Yeah, but before it was really very difficult situation, and still is in some parts.
Veronica, why is there so much focus now on water here in Brussels?
Because I really think that climate change is exacerbating and accelerating the impact of what is deep down unsustainable management of water over the last decades, notwithstanding a very robust acquis that is there. Just to say that the 3 last summers have been the hottest ones on record globally and for Europe. You know that the excellent European climate risk assessment published by the European Environment Agency pointed to the fact that Europe is the fastest growing, warming continent. Yeah. And really the summer of 2024 appears by all summer to have been the hottest one ever recorded. So this acceleration of the climate change impact is drawing people's minds, letting businesses feel the heat. Even if I must say, the businesses are claiming water-related problems since over 10 years. If you look the latest edition of the World Economic Forum, I mean, it's fair to say that businesses have been shouting about water-related problems, be it in the forms of extreme weather events that, of course, also destabilize production, or in the form of pollution or otherwise, since many, many, many years. from DG Environment and Commissioner Roswell, we really make a point of principle to underline, that what we are seeing is really the tip of the iceberg, because around the problem is really the triple planetary crisis, biodiversity loss, pollution, driven by this unsustainable management of the most precious resource we have on
Absolutely.
Earth.
Yeah, yeah.
In our blue planet, by the way.
Exactly. I was going to come to Kudrutsa exactly with a point about that. Are we actually seeing this problem in a broad enough perspective? Is actually the problem broader and deeper than we assess it at the moment?
Thank you for your question. Indeed, the water crisis that we are seeing today is at the global level. I mean, we are tackling from the European perspective, but it is the water cycle, you know, functions around the globe. It's not just in Europe. So,
But do you think that in Europe that we have fully understood the scale of the problem, though?
I think it depends on who you would ask that. From my perspective, I think we did understood. I mean, the civil society is very active with that. I think the Commission has very much understood, looking at the pillars of the water resilience strategy they want to put forward in June. I'm afraid the European Parliament and the MV committee might have missed the bigger picture in terms of what this crisis means and what are its drivers, and where do we need to fix the broken cycle of water, because in the end this is how we are going to tackle everything, starting with fixing the broken cycle of water, starting with functioning ecosystem, and then on top of it, we put a thriving social environment and also thriving economies.
We hope so. That's where we want to go. I mean, for most of us here in Europe, when you talk about climate change, the experience that we have is a change in the water cycle. That's the thing that we see that's really most obvious. As a good journalist, I looked up what the European Commission is saying about this water resilience strategy, and I copy-pasted exactly what I could find, which I'll read out to you now, but don't worry, it's not too long. 3 things. Number 1, to ensure water sources are properly managed. That's one of the objectives. Number 2 is to address scarcity. And number 3 is to strengthen the competitiveness and innovation edge of the EU's water sector while promoting a circular economy approach, which, if you're playing Brussels buzzword bingo at home, that's 3 points there. You've got competitiveness, innovation, and circular economy. Amongst all of those 3 objectives, which one is the most important, do you think?
Management.
The management.
Yes.
Which is basically the first point, making sure. Why do you say that?
Yeah, because we have technologies. We know what to do. Actually, we need to be more efficient. The main consumer is agriculture. We know how we can better, manage irrigation. We know that we can manage our buildings better with reusing water and so on. So the solutions are there. I think it was a missed opportunity, maybe also with the recovery fund, because I know some member states patched up, their water systems, but we need more investments. But at the same moment, the solutions are there, and we have a very thriving, water industry, a water sector. I mean, we are technology leaders worldwide, but we should start, implementing it here in Europe.
Let's make it
more structurally. And I think there's one very crucial also element, because we have a lot of knowledge at the regional and local level, but what we are missing is data, because we need interoperable data, and there is a big, chance also into using this data to have a better oversight. What is effective, what is not effective.
Why are we missing data, Jan? Do you agree with that? And if so, why?
Well, it depends. If you look at business, we measure our water consumption, and we have in our factories water meters at every point of use. And that is monitored real time. So we have a perfect. We know exactly how much water we use, where it is going, and also if for instance there would be a leak or something, we detect that immediately. Now there are other parts of society where water is not managed in the same way. Farmers.
I mean, Coca-Cola's water footprint is over 90% of it is the farmers that are using water to grow the ingredients that go into your products. Are they managing and measuring? They got data.
Well, yes and no. So 2 weeks ago, I was with a project that we have in Spain with citrus farmers, lemon farmers. They have very advanced technology with drip irrigation and also applying the fertilizers through that same system. And they know exactly how much water they consume because they also need to pay for it.
I was going to say, why are they doing that? It's because of the price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are other examples where also at households, not every home has a water meter. You pay a fixed amount. So there is no incentive to
Is that widespread? Because I was pretty stunned when you told me that. Because I've always lived in somewhere where we have to pay for it.
Mhm.
Is that widespread across Europe, that people are just paying a flat fee?
Particularly if you look at cities where you have apartment blocks, there is only 1 meter for the whole block, and then that is then divided amongst all the inhabitants.
So you would agree with Hildegard then that in fact on those 3 points from the water resilience strategy that in fact the management is the important one?
Yeah, I do agree, particularly because I think there is still a lot to gain in better water management. Yeah, so still a lot of water is lost, and if we are able to retain the water and use it more efficiently, I think we can make sure that there is enough water for everyone.
Yeah, yeah. Veronica, in the ranking of those 3, is there one that you consider most important?
Innovation, competitiveness, and circular economy still, or we have
Well,
management coming in the
No, I'm
future?
talking about those 3 exactly. The management, the water scarcity, or the innovation, circular economy, etc.
I think without managing, so understanding the scale of the problem and managing it better, indeed, we will not go very far. So I fully agree with both Mrs. Bentel and Mr. Burgers that that's the key point because, as I said, the driver is our unsustainable management of water. And when I mean that, I mean, indeed, all the aspects that have been touched upon. We have part of society whose water consumption is not even properly measured. We are leaking. I mean, we have very high rates of water leakages still across several member states. I was looking at the pictures still this morning. We have some member states where we are leaking close to 50% of the water which is transported to the
Which means we're not
pipes.
valuing it. We don't value it.
It means we don't value it, basically. Yeah. So on the one hand, we are claiming everywhere, I mean, this is the most precious resource, etc., etc. On the other, you know, you have since decades water infrastructure that are not properly modernized. And as Mrs. Bentele was saying, some member states have lost also the opportunity to, you know, use the PNRR to possibly do better. Some member states have seized this opportunity, on the contrary, which is very the recovery resilience plans.
Okay.
So, I mean, and in that respect, I must say, I really salute the decision of the college led by Vice President Fitto very recently to secure that in the midterm review of the cohesion policy, we have identified water together with defense, competitiveness, housing and energy as one of the 5 top priorities on which we are inviting member states to spend the remaining money under cohesion policy. So it shows that the Commission, once again, has really understood the urgency of the problem and the importance to lay down now the ground for action.
On some of those sectors that you mentioned, it's quite easy to understand when we had the moment when we realized we had a problem, let's say, when it comes to defense and security, when it comes to competitiveness. What was the moment with water when we realized we had a problem? Was there a crisis? Was there a tipping point where suddenly the conversation changed?
I really believe that the accumulation of summers, starting maybe around the summer of 21, 22, where member states that are not usual suspects, Mediterranean countries, I come from one of them, are very used to water scarcity. It's true that the problem is aggravating at such a scale that I really confronted with huge problems, but let's be honest between us. For decades, this problem of the Mediterranean countries was not really a big European issue, but drought has started to hit Sweden, Germany, Finland even here and there, certain parts of countries that were completely out of, and I mean other unsuspected one. France has been also hit quite a lot. So this has really brought the problem to a scale and an understanding which is unprecedented. And it's accompanied by the floods, which is also a problem of management of water.
For sure, absolutely. And Kudrytsa, to get your point, your thoughts on those points of ranking of order, these things from the European Commission, these objectives that they have, what do you think is most important?
Yeah, I would also go with the management issue. I think we do have a management problem, but I would also point out at the innovation. I think that innovation might be understood a bit narrowly towards just technological innovation. Innovation can also be social innovation. It can also come into policy. It can also come into economic instruments. Therefore, I would also point towards that.
We kind of had that moment with energy, right, where everybody suddenly started to spend a lot more time talking about it, and certainly it paid a lot more attention to it. And we kind of need to have the same thing happen with water, I'm guessing, right?
And the forecast is that the demand will increase.
Right.
I think this adds to the whole picture. So we have already a situation of scarcity, and the forecasts are telling us that the demand will increase.
Because
also
of
with
technology
the green,
demands?
yeah, green transition, and so I don't know, electrolyzers, and so producing green hydrogen, and so on. Also, more people use more water. So I mean, this is combines then, or aggravates the situation.
Veronica, everybody's here to talk about the water resilience strategy, and you're keeping your cards relatively close to your chest about it. But can you give us a hint of what's new? What's new in that document that we're going to get later this year from the Commission?
I believe, and I hope, of course, we're still in internal decision-making process, but the focusing of the minds on the problem and its scale, and also our suggestion for key enablers on which to focus in order to find solution. So first of all, and this I can reveal because it has been debated also in other public moments, you know that we are pursuing 3 key goals accompanying the overarching vision of achieving water resilience, but it's really about restoring the water cycle, which is impossible to do without focusing also on the restoration of the ecosystems, which are not just the aquatic ones, but also the green part of our planet that needs to accompany the necessary evapotranspiration, and indeed with a source to sea approach, as we've been underlining in the reports that we've recently published on the river management plans.
Some bedtime reading for everybody, is it?
Voila. I mean, everything is connected in our planet. So focus on both the blue and green parts, and we count very much also on businesses actually to do their part, because they need to be part of this transition. Second second goal is really to drive Europe towards a water-wise way of managing, this resource in a very circular manner. Here, circularity comes very strongly as part of the solution. And the third goal is really one of also securing access to clean water and sanitation for all, not only because we have still intra-EU problem, we tend to forget about that, but imagine that still today, across European Union, we have 1.5% of the population which lacks access to proper toilets, sanitation, and 4%, we are talking 23 million people across the EU that do not have access to clean, stable supply of drinking water. I mean, so we have an intra-EU problem, but of course we also see this very much as an important arena for our businesses, some of the most competitive in the world. I mean, we have European businesses among the top 15 best providers globally, can do so much more globally, in interactions
we can
with countries.
develop champions in Europe on water in a way that perhaps we haven't in other sectors, but you think that there's still a chance we can be properly competitive players in that area.
No doubt about that.
So the European Parliament has its own initiative report on water resilience. You had a little vote on it yesterday. What's new there? What are the key ideas?
Well, I think what we try to do is really to have a holistic approach, which incorporates actually, because we had, I think, in the past also focused on quality of water, but now we also talk, of course, quantity, we talk security, we talk innovation, competitiveness, so a little bit also the industrial aspects. And I think this is the important thing. And what I also learned in the process of the report, we have a lot of experience on the regional and local level, because water is also local. So there is no one size fits all, and we have to be, aware and at the European level. This is what I would be, very vocal about and advocate that we take this, experience from there. But as I said, we need also some rules. For example, if there's scarcity, I mean, their guidelines have been developed, who will get water first, I mean, this
Yeah,
is a
there's a hierarchy.
really tough decisions to make. And of course, also what was said about, cultural, habits, for example. For example, in Germany, it's hard to reuse water is not very, familiar, really. I
Right.
mean, or to use grey
Yep.
water, also, to use
Whereas in
wastewater.
Catalonia, it's totally normal.
Exactly. So we also have to talk about, some behavioral shifts.
Yeah.
So I mean, just to become more aware. And I think what was said, industry is very much aware about consumption. But as I said, citizens are not aware. They're not aware what it costs also to manage water. It's a service. It has been maintained, the system, and to be water smart. To know your consumption at which moment of the day and when you can use less and
It's very
be
similar
aware,
to the conversation about energy, actually.
Absolutely.
then.
So we can use this, discussion and process, and adapt it a little bit for the water supply. And I think there's also a big issue about financial aspects, because as Veronica said, people feel that their homes are put into danger, and the damage is so high that you would not get an insurance anymore,
Right.
because the situation is so acute. So
Let me come to Kudrytsa, because WWF came out, reacted to the draft yesterday from the Parliament. They said the MEPs had a drought of ambition. That's exactly what you said, and that the MEPs were relying too much on technology, not enough on nature-based solutions. Why do you think they're doing that?
So WWF and other environmental NGO tackling water policies have reacted, and we were quite disappointed in seeing how much diluted the vote from yesterday was compared to the first draft report.
You mean because of like binding rules and things like that?
I mean, because at the beginning, nature-based solutions were the backbone of the water resilience strategy in the own initiative report, and then so many other solutions were added that now you can barely find them within the mix when they are the only proven way that will solve the water crisis that we are
Long
seeing.
term.
Long term, exactly.
Mind you, as I said, I mentioned in Catalonia, they've got a lot of technical solutions as well as the nature-based solutions there. I mean, they just lifted their water restrictions, actually, I think yesterday, but they're carrying on with their desalination because they say we need to carry on doing this.
Yeah,
big
Can I-
cities.
Go on, yeah.
Yeah.
I think there is absolutely, and I agree with Kondruta, there is absolutely a bigger case to be made for nature-based solutions. We have invested since the last 15 years a lot in nature-based solutions, so restoring wetlands with local partners like WWF locally.
Yep.
And we have seen the enormous benefits that they can generate. So they act as sponges, so they retain the water, that makes sure that the water stays in the area, can infiltrate to the groundwater, and that it is available for everyone there.
For anybody who's watching online who doesn't really know what a nature-based solution is,
Yeah.
can you just break down, give me a couple examples?
The nature-based solutions is basically using the principles of nature or to improve water resilience. So that can be restoring a wetland, but it can also be in agriculture if you are applying things like cover cropping, you're restoring the biodiversity in the soil to retain more water in the soil, or even biological treatment of diseases. So nature-based solutions can be a wide range of things, but normally people can think about it like nature restoration and this concept of sponges, that you can do in the rural area, but even also in cities, in urban areas.
Yeah.
And the good thing with nature-based solutions is they have also a lot of co-benefits. Yes, they are very useful for climate adaptation. It prevents floods. It helps when there is drought, that there is still water
helps with
available.
the biodiversity,
But there
slows down the water.
It is also then stimulating biodiversity, and it can even capture carbon in the soil. And
So why did the MEPs wind back on it then?
Well, I would not assess it like that. I think this is a combination of both because we need both. So, for example, in urban areas, there's very little nature to restore. I mean, so I think we need both. So
Did the MEPs think that we're being
I would not assess it like that.
That we're being unrealistic about the scope and the scale that we can get to with nature-based solutions? Do they think we can't deploy this everywhere?
Well, I think we need all stakeholders on board. I mean, it's not the environmental committee alone. We have also an agricultural committee who has its say on that. And we had big battles in the past. So I think the important thing is of the strategy to be holistic, to bring everybody on board with their solutions. I think this is the most important thing.
But you also need to have sort of, I mean, it's a carrot and stick type thing, and you need a bit of stick as well, don't you? You need to kind of have some binding rules. You need to enforce things and say this needs to be fixed, because otherwise we're in a situation where we are now, where we've got a ton of very nice recommendations and rules, and could you just please try and sort out X, Y, and Z? But it's not actually happening, is it? I mean, we're talking about action. The action's not happening. Anyway, let's go to questions from the audience, because I'm sure already after that there will be somebody will want to ask a question. So if you would like to, hold up your hand. We've got somebody with a microphone somewhere. Go ahead. So tell us your name, tell us your job, and ask your question.
Hello? Yes, working. Hi, my name is Ricardo Marvão. I'm one of the co-founders of BTI. We're an innovation agency. And thinking of the title, Intention to Action, and knowing that, okay, management is the biggest hurdle, what are some of the actions that can actually be done by, I would say, cities or corporates to actually move forward? Because if we don't see water as something important right now, because there's 50% of waste, then what do we need to do this
to
action?
switch it? Yeah. Who wants to have a go at that one?
Shall I?
Yeah, come on.
To break the ice? Well, the actions are very numerous, but indeed I would connect them to the key objectives that I think we have to push together. So when we say that we need to restore the broken water cycle, indeed there is a lot to be done in terms of restoring the natural ecosystems in which we work. And I must say, again, I can only salute companies like Coca-Cola and others that are engaged in these pretty holistic approaches. There where they have their plans, they try to stipulate partnerships and agreement with local communities so that there is some investment into biodiversity restoration and so on. Why do we need it? Because this is the long term. Mrs. Bentele was pointing to the increase in the demand. A data center alone, one data center is 620 million liters of water consumption per year. One. Can you imagine what the digital transition means with artificial intelligence and cloud computing everywhere? So of course it also means data centers to become by far more water efficient by design. We're exploring very much techniques like dry cooling that we will also need for energy, overall consumption, 20% of total water consumption across the EU. But agriculture clearly has a lot to do, 50% of average
trigger
consumption.
them into action? That's what he's asking. How do you get them into action?
Action for agriculture, precision farming everywhere. We have it in Africa. I mean, we've been financing with development and precision farming in so many countries of Africa, and we are not yet doing everywhere across the European Union where it's needed. We can certainly repair our water infrastructure, especially in those countries where we are losing 50% of the water we transport.
What's the incentive to the water company to do that?
The incentive shouldn't be for the water company only. I think this is a very important point of the strategy. I think that this is a collective problem of society, and therefore, if one of the reasons behind the lack of capacity of member states to deliver is lack of sufficient public funding, we should ask ourselves the question, what about the right price to be paid by everyone in society? So do we have enough liquidity? Are member states prioritizing adequately? And is there a place also for private financing to enter into the construction? There were, the
new kinds of businesses to be built, you mean, around?
Sorry?
New kinds of businesses to be built around it. Is that what you're talking about? Or boosting the ones that are already there to fix things like leaks?
Well, I think in general, businesses, private finance, also financial investors have a role to play, and we count very much also on much stepped up support that also the European Investment Bank has pledged to give to water investment. As you know, it's important to have big financial investors coming into the arena, also in terms of de-risking this type of operation. But yes, we need private money to be channeled into what will always be, with a few exceptions, I would say, too little budget available in public pockets, including in the possibly revised and hopefully better targeted on water next MFF.
Jan, you guys talk about replenishing the water that you use. Can you talk me through how you actually do that? And how do you kind of measure it, basically?
Yeah, so this is a global commitment that we already have since 2007, and we have a global commitment to replenish 100% of the water that we use in our beverages. And on top of that, in areas where there is high water stress, we replenish the water for 100%, the total water use, in the local river basin, because water is local.
Because you produce locally and you source locally, and you replenish.
Yes, and how we replenish, basically there are three types of interventions. So there is what we call the nature-based solutions, so restoring wetlands, this sponge concept. There is efficient agriculture. There's helping farmers to use water more efficiently, and that what we call non-conventional water sources. So that can vary from rain harvesting in a Greek island, to reuse of wastewater in Spain. So in areas where and it is also very important to address the local water challenge, because it's not everywhere the same. So there are areas where the most important problem is water quality, actually.
Right.
Yeah, and then you need to address that. But in other areas where there is really water scarcity, there is no water, so there is no water to replenish, then you can look at options like reusing wastewater as a source of water that is now just discharged into the river and then flushed to the sea.
Yep.
And
and again, as Veronica was saying, that's done in other parts of the world on a much bigger scale.
Yeah, but even in Europe, and I think Spain is a very good example, they are already quite advanced. So in many parts of Spain, this actually is already a practice. But it should be indeed a standard practice.
But as far as you're concerned, your company's doing that for what reason? Because it's good business? Because you make a profit out of it? Because it's good for your image? Or because it's just a commitment that you've made? Why
we are not making a profit out of it, but for us, the main driver is business resilience. Yeah.
Right.
If we don't have water, we cannot produce.
Yeah.
If we don't have ingredients, same problem.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So it is a business imperative to work on this. That's why we are also investing in these type of projects. But the thing is how to scale those solutions. We can do the local projects near our factories, but that's not going to move the needle.
No.
So then the question is, how do you scale those initiatives with the local partners? We try to work with local partners. We try to get this, what they call collective action off the ground, but it does require the engagement of a lot more sectors and people.
And it's kind of what you were talking about in your question. How do you kickstart things to improve the situation, get everybody on board? How do you do it? I mean, as a politician, how do you start conversations about water? You're from Berlin. How do you start conversations there?
Well, as it was said, it's a local issue. So everybody has to become aware, what's the situation. This is why I was so much advocating for data, that people are aware what's the situation, when are the peaks and so on. I mean, and this should then be tackled, at a local level. For example, in Berlin, we also practice the sponge city, approach, and also we build a lot. So we do the green roofs, we do the facades and stuff like that. But we should also, there I would be for targets. If we build new, for grey water targets, efficiency targets, because this is a direct return of investment. If you use less water, you feel it in your wallet. So this makes a lot of sense. So I would aim for these measures which have direct effects where people see that. But I would also introduce one thing, the storage. I mean, this is also with regard to energy. We have to store water because this is also a practice thousands of years old. We had cisternas, and I know this, for example, it was interesting in the hearing too, in, Central Europe, they do much more storage. So they don't run into these kind of, traumatic situations. So I think also this idea, how we store and keep water, be more rational about it, be more preventive, have a more...
Because we kind of didn't need to, maybe, in
Exactly.
places like
Yeah,
that.
because sometimes you need a lot and then you don't need so much. So to be more aware of this, also for security reasons, because now we also run security risks. Water infrastructure is critical infrastructure.
For sure,
So I mean, we have to be also look from this perspective.
Can I get your thoughts on this?
Yes, of course, especially on the water storage issue. I mean, there are different types of storing water, and artificial reservoirs. What they do is taking water out of the system and leaving less water to circulate within the system and within the natural cycle of water. So this is exactly what is causing, the water cycle to be broken, because it's less water, and also less water means less water quantity, but also higher pollution of water.
So building extra reservoirs isn't the answer, then?
It is not the only answer for water scarcity. There are places I can see that there are places where this is something that needs to be done, but it's not the only solution. And there are ways to actually nature-based solutions to store water so it can circulate and it can do what it does, produce cleaner water and everything else.
And be part of the system rather than just stashing it away in a large lake somewhere.
Exactly, and there's also a problem with the evaporation. There are higher and higher rates of water evaporation in artificial reservoirs because, the temperature is going higher. We live in hotter
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely something to take on board. And I was looking at, as I was saying earlier on, we're not really lacking rules and directives and things from the Commission when it comes to water. What we're lacking is application of those, implementing, saying actually let's do it. Why is that not happening at member state level? Why are they not doing what you're asking them to do?
Well, first of all, I'm extremely glad that we have now a very granular assessment of what the member states really are doing in terms of managing water. And it's true, the picture is not fantastic when we look at the status from an ecological perspective of our water. Only 40% of our fresh waters are in good status, and this is more or less the same figure we had in the previous cycle of River Basin Management Plan, so no real change. On the contrary, and this is a very important factor that I hope also the European Parliament sees with big eyes, the chemical status of water is deteriorating. Not by huge numbers, but still around, we had around 34% of our fresh waters in good status in 2015. Now, 2021 assessment, only 27% of the waters are in good chemical status. So I'm sorry to say these forever chemicals, they have different names and different substances, are really, really damaging the water cycle. And it's not just a damage of the water as such, but of the habitats. And as we go back to the story of natural ecosystems not being able to do the job that they should do, of course it contaminates the sea, which is of major importance for the entire evapotranspiration of our water cycle. So very, very important that the pollution challenge is seriously tackled in this context.
Is the pollution challenge that you're talking about there, has those numbers changed simply because we're measuring better than we did in the past?
There is this element as well. So it's a combination of the two facts. We are monitoring better, we are measuring better, and this is a plus. But
we're discovering new, fun, weird, awful stuff that we found in the water that we didn't know was there.
The forever chemicals are an emerging challenge. There are new ones every day. If you speak to the water treatment communities, they will tell you that they managed to find a membrane that captures one and few more are arriving. And this is why we're also working on a chemicals industry package, which is another important announcement in the political guidelines of the president. And of course, we will have to simplify REACH very much, but we're also called to provide clarity on things such as PFAS. So very, very important that these agendas are brought up together. Why are the member states not doing enough? I think it's a combination of things. Certainly lack of prioritization of this topic, and I think now eventually we're getting collectively there. Let's also thank the colleagues of the United Nations. I think that the UN Water Conference in 2023 has played a pivotal role in sparking also a global momentum. We are also putting, I think, better policy coherence between different instruments, because yes, we may have a fantastic acquis, but it's also important that things really act in synergic manner.
But
And
not just across kind of environmental legislation or water legislation, but also industry, across competitiveness, across environmental things related to climate change or whatever. I mean, you need to be, and health, you need to be joined up across all of those things.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
I think we're doing enormous efforts collectively. I always see scope for more.
Yeah, lots of meetings in that building just over the road. Let's open up to questions. Yes. Tell us your name, tell us your job, and ask your question.
Hello. Does this work? Yes. My name is Agnes Lisik. I represent Oceana. Thank you to the European Commission for mentioning seas, because eventually all the water ends up in the sea and the oceans. So my question is for Coca-Cola, because in last December, Coca-Cola decided to drop its World Without Waste program and the goal to have 25% reusable packaging, which is known to be the best solution to plastic pollution. And instead you focus on recycling. However, there is scientific evidence that recycling can contribute to microplastic pollution. So my question is, what is Coca-Cola doing to ensure that your packaging and recycling facilities do not contaminate the water with microplastic?
Well, first of all, let me say that I'm not a packaging expert, but in general, you know that Coca-Cola is really keen to make sure that all our packaging is collected, because we use that same packaging material again in our bottles. So in Belgium, our bottles are made of 100% recycled PET. And so packaging is a very important topic of our agenda, and the collection of packaging is the key element to avoid that packaging ends up in the environment and then can contaminate things like water.
What can you do to improve the collection?
Well, the most effective system that we have seen across Europe is deposit return systems. Yeah. So we have.
It worked for me back in the 1970s or so when I was a kid. Yeah, for sure, it definitely worked.
Yep.
I got pennies, you know.
It is very effective, and every time when there is a new system implemented, we had recent new systems implementation in Slovakia, in Austria, Greece, Romania. The big benefit is that you get the material back, but also with a very good quality. Yeah. So that it facilitates this whole circular economy approach.
Circular economy and money, and two things that are in my head. Fundamentally, do you think the lever to fix this is pricing? Actually, we touched on this earlier. Pricing water in different parts of the processes, industrial processes, in agriculture, in healthcare, in all kinds of sectors. Should we be changing how we're pricing water, Veronica?
Yes, but with fairness is my reply, in the sense that certainly the signal that you give to the market, I mean, we were just mentioning the positive return scheme, is super important to drive choices. But I'm a believer also of the social fairness behind and the attention to,
But fair to who?
Well, let's face it, I mean, today, essentially, large businesses pay the price because, yes, they're recorded. I would say a big chunk of households, maybe not all of them, not necessarily all SMEs, and certainly not the biggest part of agricultural world.
But there's one thing you guys don't like. It's a ton of tractors just down there on the roundabout demonstrating. And surely if you change the pricing for agriculture, that's what's going to happen, isn't it?
And what do you think about that? Well, how would you cover those news from
Oh,
a
we
social
go out and we talk to them
perspective?
and we ask them what they're saying, and then we report what we've got to say. We don't have opinions. We
So
just say what they've got to say about it.
I think that behind the tractors is not the price of water. Behind the tractor is the social unfairness, once again, of which some parts of agriculture are victim because of the supply chain modality. So I think if every time we deviate the attention from the real problems to be tackled and end up with solutions that do not guarantee that everyone contributes in a fair manner and also taking account of the actual capacity to pay, and I would say of the pollution loads, and that this is accompanied by measures that promote and accompany the transition, like we're doing also, again, also for the industrial world. I'm proud of the...
Somebody's got a permit to pump a ton of water out of a river, and then suddenly you're going to change their pricing policy. They're not going to be enormously happy.
Well, first of all, I'm not going to change anything because this is a competence of the member states. It's really the member states' duty also to devise a pricing system. So the European Commission is not going to change this out of the blue.
It would be difficult for you to do it.
We don't even have, I would claim, the legal power as such. So it's really not our competence. But I think you're asking me the question, is this a major leverage? Yes, it is, but I would also say it's part of a picture where it's important that this transition is accompanied by better awareness of what the problem is, accompanying in particular those sectors that clearly have the biggest gap to fill, and that everyone sees that it's really a societal problem that we're tackling together.
Yeah. Well, we're getting society together is not an easy business these days. How would you see that, Hildegard, particularly the pricing? How do we make that work?
Well, I was astonished. We had a discussion how wide the range is between member states. You know, there were even member states without having a price on water. It was for free, but I think this was abandoned. So I think, you know, people need to understand what's behind the price and what's at stake. You know, and if they are given the opportunity to save water, they would accept also to pay a little bit more. You know, I mean, this is the same with fuel or so on. You know, I mean, you need to be aware. At the same moment, you know, I was thinking because what I very much like, and you know, is this fresh water, you know, fountains which you find at the airport or you know in Berlin, you know, at big places. I think with this you show that you care about the basic need. For example, in summer, because what I'm very much concerned about is, you know, older people who kind of suffocate because of the heat. I mean, I know this from my own mom. She doesn't want to go out anymore, and if you know that there is a water which is for free, you know, which is for free.
There,
So I'm fully with Veronica. We need to be very smart on these measures because it's very sensitive. You know, water, access to water is so essential, and we need to be. This is one of the biggest obligations of the state to secure this access to water and to make it affordable for everybody. But at the same moment, to make people more aware, more consciousness
their consumption.
about their consumption. And this is
but particularly
shared
farming.
problem.
Particularly farming, no, who seem to just.
But I don't think that the farmers are not aware about you know, the water. I mean, I would really, you know, kind of, you know, not blame farmers for all the bad in the world. I mean, they're the most dependent on a functioning nature. So I think they would have the biggest interest. And if they are given, as Veronica said, you know, this, you know, support for transform, this is also after, you know, animal well-being. Nobody wants to torture, you know.
But you need to make them feel the need. Don't you?
But if irrigation is possible, drip irrigation is possible, it's not yet done all over the place, then help them to, it's an investment they have to make. So I mean, give them credits, whatever, loans to do this investment, accompany them, you know, counsel them and so on.
Certainly, precision farming certainly sounds like a great idea, and as you say, great European projects on that, great research on that, and we do know how to do it, so why isn't it more widely deployed? I don't know, but we had somebody wanted to ask a question over there. Would you like to ask a question? We have where's the microphone?
I can go without the microphone, I think.
No, let's get it through. Yeah, and then we'll need a microphone because then everybody on YouTube can hear it.
Thank you. My name is Hannah. I'm representing Weber Shandwick, which is a PA consultancy. And I'm curious about whether all the discussions on data collection and monitoring will pave the way for benchmarking or determining binding targets for industries that typically have a high water footprint. So
Good
mostly
question.
policy question.
Very good. Who wants to have a go at that one?
I'm happy to start. Just to say that, as you may know, indeed, for example, in the recent revision of the Industrial Emission Directive, we are for the first time introducing these binding performance targets and binding performance levels. And yes, I do see these as an important manner to progressively also drive better competitiveness by having de facto targets. I mean, in that specific field, they will go more sector by sector, ceramics, steel, and so many other sectors that are there. But I also think, yes, potentially this could one day lead us to, have better agreed targets. What I can say is that we are obliged by law to set a target for reducing leakage rates. This is a regulatory requirement under the revised Drinking Water Directive, so you will see that coming to the scene by 2028. But indeed, first we have to really measure what the problem is.
What would be the WWF answer to that question? Would you be looking for binding targets?
We would welcome very much seeing binding targets applied to the biggest water consumers and the biggest water polluters.
Yeah.
I think it is only fair, because we talked about social justice. It is only fair to see that people would pay as much as they consume and as much as they also pollute.
Jan?
Yeah, I can definitely comment on that. So binding sectoral targets on water efficiency, I don't think that's a good idea, because it's very complicated. Because
why is it complicated?
Because if you just look at our sector, soft drinks, the water efficiency in a plant is so much different in terms of the type of packaging that is produced. If you have refillable bottles, you use much more water than when you have single-use bottles.
Wash them,
Yeah, you have to wash them. Yeah.
Right.
And also the type of products that you produce. But
that would be taken into account, wouldn't it? In the
well,
targets.
but then you go. Yeah, there is.
You would think. If we're talking about fairness.
If you are approaches like a one-size-fits-all, then it doesn't work. You have to differentiate. But the main issue I see is that it doesn't take into account the fact that water is local. Yeah, we have internal water efficiency targets for our plants. However, we have more ambitious targets in plants that are in water-stressed areas than in plants where there is an abundance of water.
Sure. And it's also, but it's not just local, it can also be across borders as well, which can create a lot of tension. It can be regional, it can be national. Of course, you've got also a huge complexity in the way that the water companies work, because sometimes they're public, sometimes they're private.
What I would propose is an alternative to say that basically all companies should have a water management system.
Right.
Yeah, that is urging you to measure your water, to create a water saving plan, to monitor and then adjust, and then you create this continuous improvement cycle, and then you have all companies that are working to gradually improve their water efficiency. That's, I think, much more effective than setting, a limit.
Yeah.
Because then also companies that are below the limit, they will say,
Well, they can sell some credits. That's how it works with climate change.
System.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Can I get your thoughts on that?
Well, I would rather agree with this approach, because it's more, organic, I would say, because we first need to establish the management, the saving plans, and so
we've got a management problem, don't we?
Yes,
a serious one.
Yes, but I think, for example, if you build new buildings, then I would be in favor of standards. Yeah, that's a different thing. But if you come from an existing system, as it was described, I think it's more fair and more adapted to go from what is there, but force everybody to monitor and to make the effort.
But how binding should targets be? Should there be kind of punishment for overusing, or fines? I mean, not punishment. I mean like fines for overusing.
You would not hear this from an EP, from an
Well, that's
EPP
what I'm asking
politician. No, I mean, as I said, I mean, I think we should be
No,
very
but I mean,
careful.
we talk about
please,
fairness, and then I
yes,
listen
but
to
we
fairness,
also
and
need.
sometimes
We
I
are
think,
talking politics
yeah.
here, and what we see currently, it's a rising costs of living. You know, we
Yeah.
see rising costs for energy prices, for rents, and so on. So I would be very careful to come up, you know, with rising costs for water. You know, I would
sure.
be very careful. Yes,
Absolutely, yeah,
I would be very careful. I would do it in an incremental way, as it was said. Look at the biggest, you know, consumers, and give us a fair chance, you know, to everybody, to the individuals, but to the industrial consumers to reduce, to make an obligation to reduce, but on a really on a, you know, individual basis. Yeah.
We're going to have to wrap up relatively soon. It is a fascinating conversation. Somebody's waving at me from the back. Would you like to ask your question? Go on. We'll have to wait for the microphone to come over. It's on its way.
Yes, thank you. João from EPA Public Affairs Consultancy. I was wondering, you're talking about reuse. What is your take on introducing a water hierarchy the same way we have, for instance, for waste? That was something that was raised during the stakeholder consultation on the 6th of March, and I was curious to see maybe from Veronica, MEP Bentley, or others in the panel. Thank you.
So from my perspective, I mean, whether it's a hierarchy, what matters is that somehow we create a common consensus that we will not get towards water resilience unless collectively as society, and of course taking into account the differences locally, regionally, etc., we shift our mindset to try to reduce water demand, become more water efficient by design, and indeed facilitate reuse of water. So overcoming also their cultural barriers to reuse of water and embrace this as an opportunity. And only as a last resort, open up to alternative sources such as desalination that, of course, we will be working on in an event. As you may know, current desalination system come with some environmental impacts. We are working very hard with colleagues in the research and innovation world to secure more sustainable desalination methods, but that somehow this should come as a last resort. I think it's extremely important to have in mind.
Reuse, definitely. As you say, there are cultural barriers to that, but they can get passed if you have a kind of crisis. What do you think about water reuse?
WWF does not have an official position on water reuse.
Okay, all right. Coca-Cola?
Yes, we think it's a very good source of water that is nowadays not always taken into account. So I think water use should be a standard practice. So first of all, there is always water use within the factory. That's what we are doing ourselves. But there is also water use of wastewater.
Yep.
That could be seen as a source of water.
But do you think that should be done by companies who have to invest maybe in their own wastewater treatment plant? And I've seen places that are doing that because they think it's in their interest. Or should it be done by local authorities, or who should be doing it?
I think it should be done by the local authorities because they are the ones that are managing those wastewater plants. But they need to engage with all the stakeholders in that same river basin because they are the problem owners. It can be agriculture. It can also be that you can use the wastewater for creating wetlands for nature-based solutions.
Yeah, for sure. But should actually that be how we manage it, particularly on what you just said on a river basin level, that we have a kind of cooperative across the river basin area, because everybody's got the same interests then, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, there's a lot of, you know, river management around it. So, I mean, it's really the solution which has to be found, you know, individually, has to be adapted. But there's a lot of knowledge around. I think this is also, I think one would be one, you know, added value for the strategy, that we collect all this knowledge which is out there, which is also collected on the regional level in the committee and so on. We have many suggestions, and I think that's now the moment, like a
kind of forum.
Yeah, a forum to talk about best practice.
I've certainly heard that on the ground in my reporting. I was in Spain reporting on their drought, and they said that they would love to be sharing with colleagues in Italy or France to see what are they doing now, what great ideas have they got, and can we kind of borrow that and adapt it maybe. Wrapping up, Veronica, what will this water resilience strategy actually mean for Europeans? Somebody who's watching at home somewhere else in Europe, they're tuning in, they're trying to understand what's going on with water. What changes would we actually see as consumers or as businesses after you have got this water resilience strategy off the ground?
So my first message would be, if we start acting together on it now, we will avoid the repetition of the energy crisis. I think it's already a nice message to give. So act now to secure the long-term resilience that we need.
But would you communicate about it like that, actually, and say, let's try and avoid what happened with energy?
Yeah, I think so. It's a very important message because, I mean, somehow we've found ourselves in a truly emergency situation on energy matters after many years of, attempt to go towards more renewables, etc. So let's also not deviate from the path we've undertaken under, decarbonization policy, clean transition, and so on, because it is our future, is the future that our nature needs to sustain us and stay competitive on the global arena as well. What will change? Various things. I really believe we will see an increasingly more sustainable agriculture deploying across the European Union, and all consumers are longing for that, I can tell you. There is certainly a lot that will happen from the industrial world, so I hope that progressively we will see even water efficiency, because it's measured by the industries, as a parameter even maybe for marketing purposes. As you know, we're working on the digital product passport, which is something promised under the Eco Design for Sustainable Products Regulation that will measure the environmental footprint. Water is one of the parameters. So as consumers, over time, the possibility to choose inspired by the overarching environmental footprint of what you buy, and also to make a difference, I would say, between made in Europe and maybe other products. I think this is an interesting point. Built environment, much more attention to nature in our cities, and I can tell you that I see a coalition of mayors that are embracing also the water challenge, and they really want to go there, so hopefully more sponge cities. And I would say overall a feeling that we are not alone if we really each connect the dots and march towards the vision that unites us.
Can I get your final thoughts on that? What will change, or would you like to see change with this strategy?
Well, I think the most important thing is the awareness that we are in a really acute situation, and if we do not act now, if we don't take precautionary measures, we might end up in a situation which is terrible, that we have to choose who has access to water, and this has to be avoided in any case. One addition on the energy. Energy is not a finite resource, it is indefinite, and this is what we always say about renewables. They're all but water is a finite source, and this is the difference, and this is why it's even more acute than the energy crisis, and it's globally more acute, and I'm afraid we will not have a lot of farming anymore if you don't tackle it. We can see this worldwide, that people cannot farm anymore, and this also I was told by French stakeholders who are managing the Rhone Valley. Farming is endangered, because of water scarcities, and if you want to preserve that farming in Europe, we need urgently tackle the water issue.
Can I get your final thoughts?
I think we all need to collectively understand that water resilience is not going to be tackled by pipes and digital platforms. They are certainly going to help, but water resilience without functioning ecosystems and nature, there is not going to be any resilience at all.
Yeah, what I really hope that water resilience strategy will leverage is that we start to value water. So the awareness for water, and I very much welcome the focus now from the Commission and the Parliament on water, is that we don't take it for granted that there is water always from the tap, and that even every citizen starts to realize that actually this is a very precious resource that we need to be much more careful about. And I hope if we all are in this place, businesses, citizens, farmers, society, then I think we still have the opportunity to create a water resilient Europe.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for those thoughts. It's been a fascinating conversation. I think they deserve a round of applause, don't they? Thanks for everybody who's watching online. Please head over to euronews.com to follow world news from a European perspective. Follow us on social media. Download the app. It's brilliant. Watch us on TV wherever you are around the world in 10 different languages. It's great to see you. Send us your feedback and your thoughts. And as I say, head over to euronews.com for the latest on what's happening around our planet. See you soon.